Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of WAGE, Women Advocating for Gender Equality. Tonight we have a special guest, and we're going to be talking about parents and the rights of parents, and we're going to discuss if we still have rights, right? What do those rights look like? And again, we're going to have a great guest to bring us into that conversation. So after a brief pause, we'll be right back. Okay, so we all know that it's no secret that parents have been under attack as far as their rights goes. I mean, we could go back to COVID, and a whole slew of issues that has arisen where parents question whether or not they're in the driver's seat, right, for what's happening to their kids. Well, as of recent, we've had not one but two identical bills to enter the stage and really put those questions to a test. And tonight we have the opportunity of having someone on our show that's going to tell us a little bit about those bills, a little bit about her opinions on parental rights. And with that being said, I just want to welcome to the stage Miss Barbara Ames. Hello, good evening to you.
Hi, Sheila. Glad to join you. Thanks for inviting me.
Listen, I'm so happy to have you here. I know that you took out your time this evening and you had other things go on because you know that community and education advocacy is really important, and that awareness is equally is important as well. So with that being said, I don't want to hold you. I want to get right to the point. A lot of people think that their rights are under attack. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you could just expound on that. And before you do that, just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sure. So I live in Morris County. I'm a New Jersey born, bred, native, lived here all my life, except for being out of state for college. So I was a teacher like you, Sheila. I was a music teacher. And somewhere along the line, I was also a board of education member. So before I was before I went back to teaching when my kids were young, I was on my Hanover Township Board of Education, and so I learned a lot about the way education works and the legal aspects a little bit in legislation, because they have a legislative committee, and I served on that for a long time, and I was on my board for 9 years. So then I went back to teaching and tried to have my own life and have two children. They went through public school in Morris County. And then I began to follow my interest in the legislative area and observe what was happening in New Jersey. So that's been going on for quite a long time. We've been very active since, I'd say, 2009 or 8 or somewhere back there, so quite a long time. Wow. And as you say, parental rights have been under attack in New Jersey. So being a board member, being a teacher, being a parent, I've seen this happen, but it's quite unprecedented, in my opinion, what's going on more recently. And we've seen this, of course, just to back up a little bit, we've seen this with the sex ed standards, which probably people are familiar with, and pushing sexuality, which is not appropriate. It's not age appropriate. It's really not appropriate, some of it, for anybody to be seeing, let alone children. And of course, they're aiming this at our youngest children down to kindergarten. So parents have been at board meetings for several years now complaining about this. This is a result of sex ed standards that passed in New Jersey several years ago. And also there were transgender standards, and you may have heard about 5756, which is a rather controversial transgender policy. So all of this has been pushed on our kids down to, as I say, kindergarten. And if you've had a chance to see any of the standards, I don't even really want to say what's in some of them, but it's anything that you can imagine and all sorts of sexuality. And why are they pushing this on our public school and our children? And many of us feel this is objectionable. And if you're a person of faith, and that really doesn't matter whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, in whatever, most of the world religions do not accept the kind of sexuality which is being pushed in these standards. So it goes back to those years, a few years, 4 or 5 years ago, when this started to be pushed in New Jersey. There's been a lot of upheaval, a lot of parents protesting at school board meetings. In fact, the school board that I served on back in the 90s was the first one to get sued in New Jersey because in June, my school board tried to pass a parental rights policy. All that said was that parents had the right to know if there were things going on in their child's life that the school knew about and they thought the parents should know. Pretty reasonable, nothing radical, pretty
Wow.
common sense. And bam, the next day our school board got sued by the Attorney General of New Jersey.
Oh,
And now there are 3 other school districts that have been sued on a slightly different basis because they tried to amend the transgender policy 5756. They just tried to amend it to allow for parental notification. Governor didn't like that. And bam, 3 of them, Manalapan, Middletown, and Marlboro. And Middletown is actually the town where the governor lives. I love it. So the school board in his own town
wow.
he has sued his own school board, in other words. Those cases are still in court. But one of the things that came about in June of last year, or I guess it was in the summertime, maybe it was September, when my school board went to court in Morristown, the judge asked the governor's attorney whether this 5756, this transgender policy, was mandatory. A lot of school districts had thought that it was because the company that puts out policies called Strauss Esme had on the top of the X in the box that says mandatory. But in fact, we discovered, we were told, the attorney for the state answers, no, it's not actually mandatory at all. So now you'll notice, if you've heard, that school boards around the state are repealing it. And Old Bridge, down a little south of me and south of you, Sheila, just did this last night. So I don't know what the number is. 20, 25 school boards have rescinded the policy now to 5756. So that's kind of the background to all of this sexuality, which is being pushed on our children, that parents have been objecting to. And then we come to, let me go to what happened last week in my life. So we were all in Trenton last week. Sheila, are you there? I'm not
Yes,
seeing
yes,
you.
I'm definitely here.
Okay,
I'm
okay,
definitely here. I
okay.
got the spotlight on you because you're really conveying some great information that I think that it is important for parents to know. So,
Just shut me up
um,
if you want to interject, and feel free to stop me.
oh, trust me, I
But
will.
so
You're
then,
doing great. You're doing great.
okay. Okay, so then last week, with very short notice, we got a notice that a policy called the Freedom to Read, or the Right to Read Act, was going to be heard in Trenton. And this bill would have, how do I do this quickly? It would, because it's not dead yet, it would protect librarians in schools and public libraries who are promoting some of this, what we would call obscenity, pornography, in libraries, on school children, and in the public libraries. It would protect them from prosecution. Many states, including New Jersey, have had over the years obscenity statutes, so that you cannot go out to a street corner and hand materials that are pornographic or explicitly vulgar, is the legal term, extremely sexual, pictures, whatever, descriptions, text, whatever. You can't hand them to children. But what happened in many states was that they passed statutes to protect against prosecution, or to exempt from prosecution of these statutes. So you can't sue somebody because they're in a school promoting this. New
Right.
Jersey, strangely, is not one of those states that ever passed those exemptions, but this bill would do that. It would protect librarians from being sued or being harassed, whatever that is called. Who knows what harassment really means? It would protect them from liability, from being sued, from being harassed. But guess what? Parents don't have that right. And in fact, in a town not too far from me in Roxbury, in Western Morris County, there are a number of parents who were sued. Oh, let's see, it's about a year back now, I guess, because they were complaining about books in their school library. So the librarian, whose husband happens to be an attorney, filed a lawsuit against these parents, and it's still in court too, for harassing the librarian. What they were doing was complaining about the vulgarity in some of these books, the inappropriate sexual nature of some of these books, and they have been sued. So now we have a condition where parents have been sued, and I would suggest this is going to happen more, but librarians are being protected. They can show anything they want to any age group. And by the way, I have to say that this is all pushed by the American Library Association. When I grew up, we thought librarians were good people. Well, the American Library Association and the New Jersey Library Association are very, very, I don't know what the term is, radical in my book, as far as what they want to promote. In fact, the president of the American Library Association, whose name right now is Emily Drabinski, she is a self-admitted Marxist. I'm not making that up. There is a, she tweeted it out a while ago, and then she had better thoughts of it, and she pulled it back. But once you put something on the internet, it never dies, right? It's got
Right.
eternal life.
Right.
So I've seen it. I don't like to talk about things I haven't seen. I've seen her post. It says, I am a Marxist. She also is not heterosexual. She says that. So that's in there too. So, and I care about that less than I care about the Marxist part, frankly.
I know. I'm sorry, Barbara. I don't mean to cut you off, but what do you think is motivating this outlandish, over the top need to just bombard our youngest members of society, our children, with so much just lewdness and sexuality? Why do you think that this has taken front and center? Especially when on a national scale, our test scores are not what they could be. And,
Yes, yes.
so instead of focusing on academia, the focus just seems to be on anything but. Like, why are we focusing on anything to do with sex? And especially K to 3. I don't understand it. What do you think is motivating this push?
I don't know that I have an exact answer, but I believe they are people who want to basically destroy our country. I really think that's what's going on. And they are using our most vulnerable citizens, our little children, to do so. I mean, when we look back to history and we look back to Nazi Germany, we all remember the stories of Hitler's youth, right? The youth corps that he had. I was reading a story. It's on my email that you received from me yesterday and today, Sheila, of how he brought young children. It was like Daisy Girl Scouts, little Girl Scouts in at 10 or 12. By the time they were 14, they had to join the Jugendfrau, or the young women or the men, the boys, or they were sent to re-education centers, or their parents were maybe arrested or jailed. And by the time about 1930, late 30s came around, Hitler had 5.2 million children in this youth corps. So I'm not equating any of these people. Don't go out and think that I'm equating the sponsor of this bill with Hitler or Nazism. But I'm saying this kind of fascination and the understanding that if you want to affect the next generation or the next 50 years of the world, you need to teach the children. The Bible says, as we know, bring up the children in my ways and they will never stray from it. That's a paraphrase, right? We're familiar with that. So other people have decided that they have other goals other than what we think they would in education. And that's the only thing I can think is that they are definitely trying to influence the next generation, Sheila. So when you and I are gone or sitting in a rocking chair somewhere, no longer active, our
Right.
children will be carrying on this this worldview, which is not Christian, and it's not Jews. Whether our founding is Judeo-Christian, right? I say Christian a lot, but it's really Judeo-Christian foundations that our nation was founded on. Our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, come from that background. And of course, that's something also you've noticed today, that if you say those things, you're shut down. In fact, I'll just
Right.
say quickly, and you can ask me a question. There was a school board meeting in Old Bridge last night, and a Black pastor from North Carolina named John Monchaqua, who I have met, I know him, I've spoken with him, was taken out of the school board meeting by police. He had his Bible with him, and he was trying to speak about the Christian perspective on what's going on with our schools. And he was escorted out by policemen. I don't know if he was arrested or not, but the school board last night in Old Bridge did repeal the transgender policy, and that's what the school board meeting was about. So let's just say if you were a Christian and you're speaking about these things, you're putting your hand up and saying, I'm putting yourself at risk, I would say.
Once again, great points that you raise. My only thing that I would address is just that it's again astounding to me how religion, morality,
Yes.
it's not wanted in the schools, right? But you
No.
want to teach kids to have sex, about sex, um, even their gender, like in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, kids are not thinking about.
No, and Sheila, you may have heard that people like Gays for Groomers, they allege that this is grooming because people who try to groom children for sex trafficking, this is what they do. They bombard them with information that is not sexual information that's not appropriate. And we know that not only is it not appropriate, but it leads to great disturbance and mental stress. They're not ready to handle this. They don't want to know about it. And, one of the most frustrating things is being at school board meetings, and the LGBTQ crowd will be there. And what do they claim is the reason for all this distress? And you may have heard that counseling rates, emotional issues for children, even, suicide. I mean, the reason one of these bills is offered, it's in the statement in the back, the summary. It points to the increased number of suicides and mental health crises that children are having since COVID. And COVID shut down our schools. Our kids, we were masked, we were kept at home, social distancing. We couldn't speak to each other. There tremendous stress was brought on, and I go to the state board meetings, and I can tell you that the scores have plummeted. One time about last June, 50% of the districts, it was 53 of 106. Now, I'm not great at math, but I know that's 50%. 53 of 106 districts failed their certification, failed it. I've seen it in higher percentages, but lower numbers like
Right.
this fall. And then they also last spring, May or June, lowered what they call the cut scores, which are the scores they need for children to graduate from high school, because they were going to have so many children failing because they couldn't pass the tests. This is statewide, that they were going to have to push so many children into what they call the portfolio method, which is where they put together child builds a portfolio of what are the materials to submit. And the teachers have to look at that and grade it, assess it to determine whether they can then pass high school graduation standards. Well, so many children were going to be pushed into those portfolio standards that the state board and the educators realized teachers couldn't handle it. There were too many in the portfolio process. So they had to lower the cut scores. They lowered them by about 50 points. I think it was on a 3 or 350 150 point scale. That's not insignificant. So we're lowering graduation standards, and they're also spending money, millions of dollars. I think it was about 54 million at one board meeting to go back and remediate skills that were lost during COVID. So we've got all this learning loss. And what are we doing? We're teaching kids how to have sex in third grade, and when to decide at eighth grade whether you're ready to have sex or not. And I won't even, I don't want to go into all the rest of the stuff, but if you can imagine it, it's in the books.
This is so, I just have a really hard time grasping it all. I can't believe we're here. I think I said that to you today. It's like, it's really unbelievable, but we have these two laws, all right? I mean, these two bills. You elaborate and tell us a little bit about these two bills.
Sure.
Answering them, and what is the point of them?
I will, but one other thought comes to mind, what you're saying. Let me finish with that thought and I'll go on to the bills. But John Adams, one of our founding fathers, said, this Constitution is meant for a moral and religious people. It's totally inadequate for the government of any other. So to answer your question about what is going on, I think that they know that if they break down the moral fiber of this nation, that we cannot exist as a free people. Why they would want to do that, why we would have Americans, New Jersey people that have that as their goal, I can't answer. But I think that's very much a part of what's going on here. They know they need to destroy the religious and moral basis that this country is founded on. So then if I go to the bills, so the two bills that are up tomorrow are actually completely identical, which is a little weird, because why would you have two identical bills up? One is by W.A.G.E, and the other one is by the chairman, Joe Vitale. So these are both members of the Health Committee of the Senate. So one of them lowers the age at which children can consent to 14, and one lowers it to 13. They can consent to medical treatment, no drugs, but medical treatment. So, and if they are subject of a sexual assault, let me tell you, that was never talked about when I was a kid. If they were a subject of a sexual assault, they will tell the parents. But for any other circumstances, could be drugs, could be alcohol, could be emotional trauma. It could be the child with all this sexuality that's being pushed on them is experiencing gender identity issues. And we all know from the stories we hear that if a child goes to a doctor, a physician, even a pediatrician, or a counselor, and expresses that they're having these ideas, I would argue they're put in their heads by the teachers where we're paying for them to get educated, then the counselor will tell the parent, you need to allow this child to explore these feelings, because if you prevent the child from expressing their other than gender, other than what they were born with, your kid's going to commit suicide. So they are pushed, parents are coerced, and there's a lawsuit in South Jersey in Cherry Hill where a child was transitioned against their parents' knowledge and against their will. So I'm not making it up, like this could happen. It's already happened. So these two bills would allow for medical treatment, for counseling, for drugs, alcohol, emotional, whatever. And parents do not need to be informed unless it's a sexual assault, in which case they will tell parents. Now, tell me why, Sheila, you tell me why, what's their answer as to why they wouldn't tell parents? Do you have any idea?
I do have an idea. I do have a theory, right?
Okay, what's your theory?
Is it pretty much in a nutshell uh wakes our nation up to the fact that we actually don't own our own children through the birth certificates, the social security number. We could get into a conversation about straw men, and this conversation can go a lot of different ways,
Yes,
but the government ultimately seemingly had the say so. That's why I want to know, how can they do that, right? And so that it opens up a portal of conversation that we as Americans are not used to
yes,
having on
right.
such a broad scale. But now that we see that we're being forced with these things, right? And that's why I did this series, right? We're married to the lie, right? We're married to the lie of we have a democracy, right? We're married to the lie of, we go by the Constitution and laws, these things are important, but yet time and time again we see that many of the laws, statutes, codes are guarded when it suits a particular person or
Yes, absolutely.
interest,
Right,
right?
right.
And so now we have these laws that enter, I mean these bills, and it's like, who wanted these bills?
Yeah, who asked for them? Let
Yeah,
me share with you that what I've heard at school board meetings from the people who promote some of this. They say that, um, I think the number is about 75% or three quarters of children who attempt to transition go home to hostile parental environments. Now, so they're describing three quarters of the homes of our children as hostile to the interests of their own children. So I believe that they believe it's the state's job to protect these children. In fact, what I did hear from one of the offices of one of the sponsors today is that, the children need to be protected. They may not be comfortable talking to their parents about this, that, or the other thing, no matter what it is, whether it's an emotional issue or whether it's a gender issue, no matter. They're not ready yet to talk to their parents. I hear that a lot.
right,
So that's the reason, which is being tossed out there, with as many as 75% of families perhaps being considered hostile. That's the word that I've heard used at school board meetings. So I think that that's why this is alleged. And they think that the state is so much better to take care of our children and raise them and teach them, educate them than parents. So this is a total takeover by the state. And so, anybody who is interested in coming to Trenton tomorrow, Sheila, you do have the information. It's not until 1 o'clock. So you have time to get down to State Street in Trenton. I've been down there a lot. I'll be there tomorrow. If you see my face, I'll look the same tomorrow. Um,
absolutely.
but these two bills are up. And please, my takeaway from what I'm saying is that parents and the public need to engage. And
Yes,
if you don't, if
elaborate on that for the parents, Barbara, if you
yeah,
will, because a lot of parents feel that, like I know in North, right? If a parent is not driving and they have to catch public transportation to their meeting because they do care, right? There's so many things that happen that deter them from continuing to be involved in the process, just in alone, right? Some of those things include but not exclusive to these executive sessions that they have so many of, that just hear parents sit in an auditorium, they go to have a conversation, the back is indefinite. as to when they're coming back or if they're
Yeah.
coming
Yes. Well,
back. And
Sheila, you may know that those executive, they're allowed to have those by law. I was a school board member, and there
right,
are certainly legal and personnel issues, which you can understand. It's not appropriate to talk about, in public. And so those are classified as confidential. That's perfectly legal. But I think it would probably be fair to suggest that maybe some school districts abuse that right a little bit. Now, here's what you can do. After, when you read when the secretary of the board reads the announcement that they're going to go to closed session, you'll notice that she says that the contents of the discussion will be disclosed when the reason for non-disclosure no longer exists. So you can go after those executive minutes if you want to. They have to be published first, and the board has to decide that the reason for non-disclosure no longer exists. But you could get them, and if you could find that they were going away for exceedingly long periods of time, then maybe you could find out why they were doing that. But
so let me just share this, right? Because I think it's very, very essential to understand the very real reality. For some, it's not the same for all. And so we talk about we need parents to come down with strength, right? Parents where, and it's like north, right? People are struggling to keep a roof over their head. And
yes,
even that work in New York may not have transportation. So you struggle to get to a local school area where like, yeah, legally you can do something, but should you do it, right? It's going to discourage parental involvement, but it happens. And like you said, it's done by design, right? It's done to make you feel like not coming. Even the fact that they kind of commend each other. Well, what is
yeah,
that? And it's almost like government against the people. That's what it looks like.
almost.
Be politically correct here, right? I'm trying to leave a window of opportunity for
Yes.
a perspective on it, but ultimately, what happens is we feel like that on a local level. What is the impetus to even attempt to go out of town? Sorry, can you just tell parents why that is important?
Sure. Well, because the law that is going to tell your school district how it has to educate your children comes from Trenton. It comes from the state school board also, and nobody goes, well, very few people go there. First of all, it's in the daytime, so most people work. They're trying to work. They're trying to make a living in a very high cost state. So, but
Right,
that's where the law comes from. Now, at the local level, I would say that it's really important to be there. In New Jersey, there's always been a concept of local control, that school boards get the authority to decide what their children need to know and to have some control over that. That's really that line is being very blurred. And I would say it's intentional by the state of New Jersey now, where they're trying to make things mandatory.
right,
And so you have to understand that you can go and complain to your local school board, and they do have some flexibility. I would say, for instance, now that we found out that the transgender policy is not mandatory, school boards are repealing it. They're rescinding it.
that's
So
true.
they do have that authority. But there are other things about the law, like the law against discrimination, and that affects, gender issues. And my school is being sued on that. They can't tell parents because there are laws against discrimination that protect children who have come out from parental knowledge or whatever. So that some of it is now, it's by law. And
Right,
so that's where the law comes from, is Trenton. If you care about what the law is, if you care, for instance, tomorrow, that your rights to know about your child and whether they need counseling, and to be brought in and sit in on that counseling and understand, so that as a parent you can help work through the problems, that
right,
the bureaucrats and the legislators in Trenton they're trying to do away with that. So if it's the law, you may not have the discretion to say, no, we're not going to do that, because that's why my school board got sued. They said, we are going to tell parents if a child is not because they've come out, not because they want to be gay, but because they're expressing some anxiety, confusion, disorientation, having trouble with their schoolwork, getting into fights, being moody, whatever it is that they are seeing is going on, whatever is going on in that kid's head is going to be externally expressed sometimes.
I'm
That's the reason for notification.
right.
Not
No,
not just because they're trying to change their gender. That's not the reason for notification. Let me be clear.
right.
So you really need to be at your local school board. And here's the thing. I've heard since I was on my school board many years ago, parents say, well, I'm afraid if I go talk up about that, the teachers are going to take it out on my kids. I'm talking about the 90s. Things are a whole lot different now. And if you are not willing to stand up and fight for your child, I don't know what to say to you. I mean, that's why people are getting out of public schools, and they're homeschooling, or they're sending to perhaps a private or a parochial school where they think they'll be a little bit safe. They may be a little safer, but a lot of this law covers those other schools too. And that's the intent of the state, to be
Right.
ubiquitous and to be everywhere. So you have to stand up. You have to go to the meetings. You have to find out what's going on and bring your friends with you. And this thing about, I'm afraid, are you afraid to stand up for the welfare of your child? If that's the answer to that question is yes, I don't really know what to say to you.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. Like I said earlier, you raised really good points, and people do need to stand up for their child. But like I said, the one reality, it's like looking at. I think I saw something on social media the other day. Two people standing across from each other, and when they look down, one person is saying, "Hey, that's a 6." The other person, "That's a 9." Something
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
right.
Look and say, "Hey, you have to protect your child's best interest. It's of that child's best interest for you to be in the school board, for you to let these legislators know exactly what our kids need, because they don't know. The politics shouldn't even be. But it's another real situation when people are generally scared, when people get those phone calls to their job because
Yes,
they to school board meeting or a meeting in Trenton, voice their opinion. And these situations happen. They are true. They are real. And they
yes,
don't happen to everybody. When certain families, and it could be affluent neighborhoods or whatever, when they have the money for a lawyer, or they have the monies to defend themselves, and they know that they're not wrong for defending their case. We have a whole different tier of reality that exists at that point. I want to, bring this back in, The people who vote on these I know that we have, I think, 5 Democratic women, I
there,
believe.
there are there, yeah, there are 5 members of the committee who are Democrat, and there are 3 who are Republican. I think that maybe that's only 8, and it's very unusual to have 8 on a committee. That's usually an odd number, right? So I
Yeah,
suspect there's a Republican that they're trying to appoint, or so. I don't know why there's only 3 Republicans and 5 Democrats. So I am not sure how many votes they need to pass this. But if they lose a vote or so, and Renee, your senator from who covers Newark,
Senator,
her
yes,
name, yeah,
Renee
Burgess.
Burgess.
Her name left my head. Renee. She is one of those. She is actually. If you go to her website and you see her picture, she has a nice cross hanging around her neck. So I did call today, spoke with her office, not with her, but if she believes in those Christian values, that might be a way to speak to her about what is going on here. So it either needs 5 votes, or 4 would still beat 3 Republicans, right? And I think most of the Republicans are going to vote against it. And unfortunately, as we understand in Trenton, everybody votes by party. There's no independent thinking. So you're going to assume the 3 Republicans vote no and the 5 Democrats vote Yes. So, but
I want to
I
just
would urge
like,
you to call. If you call tomorrow morning and speak with someone, the meeting is not until 1 o'clock. And
mm,
so and I do believe from people I spoke to today that they were getting calls. And I actually got a gentleman from one of the offices who sounded, I'll say he sounded black to me, Sheila, truly. And Renee, is also black senator. And see, he said he agreed with me when I described my concerns. I found that to be interesting. I don't have
but
my
that's
paper in front of me.
I wanted you to finish, but I wanted to like just dip in there really quick on that.
Yep.
Because it's important that the audience understands that certain issues are is bipartisan issues, right? Like
Right.
I'm a Democrat.
Yep.
You are a Republican, right?
Yep.
You're white, I'm black, right? But we agree on these issues. These issues are not about race, they're not race
No.
based, right?
No.
These issues are nonpartisan. These
Yes.
issues impact parents regardless to your background, your color, your creed. We are the parents, we should have to say in terms
Yes.
of what our kids have, what's being done with our kids, and we should have to say on who is sitting in these voting, making these decisions. But that being said, I want to land this plane for the evening, and I'm going to let you just close out. What is it that you really want parents to know about the meeting tomorrow, about the meetings moving forward, and the mindset that parents need to be in as we tread forward? Because these are some very turbulent times, and I fear that if we continue to sit silent on issues that matter, we're going to be in a space that's going to be very hard at all that you might not be able to get away from. So, if you could just close us out and just take your time on your thoughts on that issue.
Yeah,
And
I would be more than glad to come back at any point in person if you want to have I don't live too far from Newark. In fact, my husband's parents grew up in Newark, and so many people that I know now will tell me they grew up in Newark. So,
yes,
yeah, everybody who was anybody was from Newark, right? So
absolutely.
I would be glad to talk. Tomorrow, the bill, as I say, you have a link to it. You could send it to anybody on your call. The meeting's at 1. And
Yes.
we just want people to, if you can't come, listen, you're working, I understand. Pick up the telephone and call them and or send them an email. That's really important. The hearing is not until 1, so that if they get bombarded in the morning, maybe like this gentleman I spoke to today, you could get him to say, I agree with you. Well, then is your senator going to vote for this or not? And one last thing I would say, Sheila, I believe that your school, the Newark School District, went from an all-appointed board. The state was in control of it for more than 30 years. It is now back under local control, correct?
Uh, so it should be under local control, right? That on paper, it's under local control.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. Do you elect your school board members, or does the mayor appoint them?
Them so again, on paper, people elect the school board members, but for
Okay.
the last entire decade, the only school board members, people won't even know them in the community, land those seats, and there are people who are directly on the mayor's ticket. And so people will call that um an election, right? I call that appointment. I actually call it corruption. And,
That was my word. When you stopped talking, I was going to say my word for that is corruption.
yeah,
And it's very sad. And unfortunately, Newark has a long history of that. It's
yeah,
tragic. It's tragic. And you need to ask, why is it this way? And who are the people in power close to us in Newark, the people who run Newark? Why are they doing this to their people? But I say the same thing about what is going on in our country now. Why are they doing this to our country? And that's on a much bigger basis. But
right.
something at the local level is theoretically easier to fix. And the people need to organize and They need to stand up and say something about it and do something about it. And I would urge you to um, to be in touch with your state senator and get her to a meeting
I
and meet with her.
out to her today because I thought it would be a good idea to actually have her, if possible, even though it was last minute, to come on the show and share some of her thoughts. She's in of Senator Rice now, and she's from Irvington, and I haven't met her per se, like to sit down and have a conversation. So I think it's a great opportunity too. Again, I reached out to her. I wasn't successful at communication. It was a minute. So moving forward, I'm going to attempt to try to reach out to her again and develop some type of dialogue. We haven't, and as a district leader, I'm speaking, we haven't had meetings where we've had an opportunity to get to know her at all. So this has formed, quite impetus to just that.
Yeah, I would suggest that you do that and you call a town hall, a public town hall meeting, and you invite her, and maybe you invite, I don't know, maybe you want to invite some folks from your school board, and you want to invite parents, and you talk about some of these issues. There are other people that we could probably get to come. I mean, this gentleman, who was at the meeting last night, Amanchukwu, his name might be. I believe he works for Turning Point USA. I think that's who funds some of his work. He's written a new book too. You might like to go look it up. But wow, if he were to come to, he's Black. If he were to come to your school board meeting, I wonder how that would work out, because he is on our side. He's on the side of parents, and it would certainly be an interesting meeting, let me say, I think, if you were there.
Somebody just put into the chat, Ra Khan says the system has children labeled as chattel property through the birth certificate. Their wards of the state.
Yeah.
Just touched on that. Like I said, I think that's another topic for another day. I would love
Yes,
to.
I know what you're talking about, and that's a separate issue, but that would apply to all of us, not just our children, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so again, we're in some unprecedented times right now.
Yes.
And that's really important for parents to step up and support their kids. But I'm just gonna, say again, because I know when I go to Trenton, people will say that to me, well, I'm so glad you're here. Other parents need to be here, but poverty creates circumstances that doesn't allow for people to be there. Like tomorrow the meeting is 1:00. Why is that meeting at 1:00? Why don't we have evening meetings where people can get off work and still, if they so decide?
Why do you suppose that is, Sheila? The state school board meets at 10 o'clock in the morning, the first Wednesday of every month. So if you teach, or you have little kids, or you're a stay-at-home mom, or your kids comes home at lunch from, whatever, you can't be there. That works to their benefit. They don't schedule this for our benefit. They schedule it for their advantage.
Absolutely. Listen, I just want to say thank you so much again, Barbara, for coming on tonight. I cannot thank you enough for taking our time out your schedule. I know that you had some things to do. I heard you say earlier that you'd love to come back. I'm going to reserve the right to ask you and bring you back, because you're such a wealth of knowledge. And I feel that if parents, for whatever reason, whether it's because they're working or their schedule and they can't come to the meetings, I think it's so important that we use tools like social media, right? Like what we have at our disposal to bring about awareness and to talk about the issues that impact all of our children, that cross beyond, like I said, race, that cross beyond politics, right?
Absolutely.
Our children, this is our future, and if we're not going to fight for them, what is it all over? So
Sheila, I just like to finish with kind of following up with what you were saying, which is, we all understand the forces in our nation right now. We hear about it all the time, that try to drive a wedge between people that look like you and people that look like me, or
Right.
people who come from other countries, or whatever, or your religion, or your age, or your, or, a myriad of your gender. I mean, that is a Marxist principle which seeks to divide people so that they fight among each other, so they can't fight the government. I think that that's what's going on, and I just like to say personally, I'm so thrilled to be building a relationship with you. I've known you, I don't know, for more than a year and a half, or I lose track now. But
Yeah.
I so value your my new friendship with you, and being able to reach across town lines, urban to suburban, and all those other differences, because we are all God's people, and we all want what's good for all people and all children. Chile, if your kids in Newark and the urban areas grow up without the skills to be successful in their lifetime, we're all going to pay that cost, not just the urban parents.
That's
We
right.
we are, we are a village. That's saying, but that statement has taken places, two places that I don't like, which usually is the government needs to take care of us, and that's
Yeah.
not the answer. But
Absolutely.
but we are a village in that we all are in this together, and all of our children matter, and we all want what's good for all people. And I'm glad to be here tonight, and I'll be glad to come anytime and speak and just help whatever I could do. I'm more than pleased to do that.
Well, listen, I'm happy to have you here. I'm happy about our relationship. And as it grows, we make the world a lot smaller, right? So that they don't have to divide it all over the place. And no, we bring it together, we unify, we love our
Right.
country, Americans, and we move forward accordingly. Thank you again for joining the show.
Amen.
Absolutely, amen. And we're gonna continue to wage love, because that's what we're all about on our show. And again, until next time, guys.
And Sheila, you have my email if you wish to send my address or that email that I gave you to anybody. Anybody wants to sign up to get in more information, I'd love to have you on my Working Together for New Jersey email list.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And good night,
Okay.